21. Doubting Castle. Not far from the place where they slept, there was a castle called the Doubting Castle, whose owner was a giant Despair. It was on his grounds that the pilgrims were now sleeping. Giant Despair, getting up early in the morning and walking up and down in his fields, caught Christian and Hawthorne asleep on his grounds. Then, with a grim and surly voice, he ordered them to awake. He asked them where they came from and what they were doing on his grounds. They told him that they were pilgrims and that they had lost their way. Then the giant declared, "You are trespassing on my grounds, and therefore you must come along with me." So they were forced to go with him, because he was stronger than they. The pilgrims had but little to say, for they knew themselves to be at fault. The giant therefore drove them before him and put them into a very dark, nasty, and stinking dungeon of his castle. Here then they lay from Wednesday morning until Saturday night without one bit of bread, or a drop of water, or light, or anyone to help them. Therefore they were in a dreadful state, being far from friends and assistance. Now in this place Christian had a double sorrow, for it was through his ill-advised counsel that they were brought into this distress. Now Giant Despair had a wife whose name was Diffidence. When he had gone to bed, he told his wife what he had done, namely that he had taken a couple of prisoners and cast them into his dungeon for trespassing on his grounds. He also asked her what he should further do to them. So she asked him who they were, where they came from, and whither they were going, and he told her. Then she counseled him that when he awoke in the morning, he should beat them without mercy. So when he arose in the morning, he took a large cudgel and went down into the dungeon to them. He began to berate them as if they were dogs, even though they never gave him any reason for doing so. Then he fell upon them and beat them mercilessly with a cudgel, and in such a way that they were not able to defend themselves or escape the giant's clutches. This done, he withdrew and left them there to commiserate their wretchedness and to mourn over their distress. So all that day they spent time in nothing but sighs and bitter lamentations. The next night, Difference, talking further with her husband about pilgrims and finding out that they were still alive, told him to advise them to kill themselves. So when morning came, he went to them in the same surely manner as before, persevering them to be in much pain because of the beating that he had given them the day before. He told them that since they were never going to get out of that dungeon, the best thing for them would be to kill themselves, either with a knife, noose, or poison. For why, he questioned, should you choose life, seeing it is attended with so much bitterness? But the pilgrims begged him to let them go. Rushing upon them, he would have doubtless made an end of them. But the pilgrims begged him to let them go. With that, he looked harshly at them. Rushing upon them, he would have doubtless made an end of them, except that he fell into one of his fits. For he sometimes fell into fits in sunshiny weather and lost the use of his hands for a time. Therefore he withdrew and left them to consider what they would do. Then the prisoners discussed whether it was best to take his counsel or not, and thus they began to discourse. Christian brother, what shall I do? The life that we now live is miserable. For my part, I do not know what is best, to live like this or to kill ourselves. The grave seems better to me than living in this dungeon, only to be oppressed by this giant. Hopeful, indeed, our present condition is dreadful, and death would be far more welcome to me than to live like this forever. Yet let us consider that the Lord of the country to which we are going has said, "You shall not murder. We are not to take another man's life much more." Then are we forbidden to take the giant's counsel to kill ourselves? Besides, he who kills another can but commit murder upon his body, but for one to commit suicide, to kill both body and soul at once. Moreover, my brother, you talk of ease in the grave, but have we forgotten that there is a hell where all murderers go? For no murderer has eternal life. And let us consider again that all circumstances are not in the hand of giant Despair. Others, as far as I understand, have been captured by him, as well as we, yet they have escaped out of his clutches. Who knows but that the God who made the world may cause giant Despair to die, or that at some time or other he may forget to lock us in, or that he may have another one of his fits when he is with us, and may lose the use of his limbs. If that ever happens, I am resolved to take courage and try my utmost to escape his grasp. I was fooled then that I did not try to do it before. However, my brother, let us be patient and endure for a while. The time may come in which we may be released, but let us not be our own murderers. With these words, Hopeful pacified the mind of his brother, so they continued together in their sad and doleful condition. Well, now, towards evening, the giant went down into the dungeon again to see if his prisoners had taken his advice. But when he arrived there, he found them still living. Yet they were barely alive, for they lacked bread and water. Because of the wounds they received when he beat them, they could do little more than breathe. Seeing that they were still alive, giant despair fell into a furious rage. He told them that since they had not taken his advice, it would now be worse with them than if they had never been born. With that, he departed. At this, they trembled greatly, and Christian fell into a swoon. Upon reviving, they renewed their discussion about the giant's advice and whether or not it was best to follow it. Once again, Christian seemed to favor suicide. Hopeful then responded, "My brother, remember how valiant you have been up to this time. Apollyon could not crush you, nor could all that you heard or saw or experienced in the valley of the shadow of death. What hardship and terror you have already gone through, but now you are so fearful. You see that I, a far weaker man by nature than yourselves, am in this dungeon with you. The giant has wounded me as well as you, and has also cut off my bread and water, and with you I mourn in this dark dungeon. Let us exercise a little more patience. Remember how courageous you were at Vanity Fair, and were neither afraid of the feathers, nor the cage, nor of a bloody death. Therefore let us bear up with patience as well as we can. So suicide is shameful and unfitting for a Christian. Now night have come, and the giant and his wife being in bed, she asked him if the prisoners had taken his counsel, to which he replied, "They are sturdier rogues, and choose rather to bear all hardship and to kill them than to kill themselves." So she then said, "Take them into the castle yard tomorrow, and show them the bones and the skulls of those whom you have already put an end to. Make them believe that before the end of the week you will also tear them in pieces, as you have done to the others." So when the morning came, the giant went to the pilgrims and took them into the castle yard, just as his wife had bidden him. These, he boasted, were once pilgrims as you are. They trespassed on my grounds, just as you have done, and when I saw fit, I tore them in pieces. In the same way, within 10 days I will do so to you. Now go down to your den again. With that, he beat them all the way back to the den. Christian and Hopeful lay themselves all day in the same lamentable state. Now night had come, and when Mrs. Diffidence and her husband the giant went to the bed, they began to renew their discourse again about the prisoners. The old giant wondered why he could neither by his blows nor by his counsel bring them to an end. And with that his wife reasoned, "I fear that they live in hope that someone will come to rescue them, or that they have picklocks with them by which they hope to escape." "Do you think so, my dear?" responded the giant. "I will therefore search them in the morning." Now about midnight, the pilgrims began to pray and continued in prayer until almost the break of day. Then Christian, half bewildered, broke out in this passionate speech, "What a fool I have been to thus lie in this stinking dungeon, where, when I could have been free, I have a key called Promise in my bosom, which I am persuaded will open any lock in Doubting Castle." Hopeful replied, that is good news, my brother. Plug it out of your bosom and try it." Then Christian pulled it out of his bosom and tried to unlock the dungeon door. As he turned the key, the bolt drew back and the door flew open. Christian and Hopeful quickly came out of the dungeon and went to the outer door, which led into the castle yard. Using his key, Christian was able to open the door also. Next, they went to the iron gate of the castle, which also needed to be unlocked. Though this lock was very difficult to turn, yet the key finally opened it. Then they pushed the gate open to make a quick escape, but the gate, as it opened, made such a creaking that it awakened the giant's despair. Hastily rising to pursue his prisoners, the giant fell into one of his fits and felt his limbs fail him. so that he was unable to go after them. Then the pilgrim found their way back to the king's highway, and so were safe, being out of giant's despair's jurisdiction. Now, when they had gone back over the stile, they began to discuss what they should do to prevent others who would come after them from falling into the hands of giant despair. So they agreed to erect a pillar there and to engrave this warning upon it. Over this stile is the way to Doubting Castle, which is kept by giant despair, who despises the king of the celestial country and seeks to destroy his holy pilgrims. This being done, they sang, "Out of the way we went, and then we found what was to tread upon forbidden ground, and let them who come after have a care, lest heedlessness makes them as we to fear, lest they for trespassing his prisoners are, whose castles doubting and whose names despair. Many, therefore, who later came to that place read the warning and escaped the danger." Next, the Delectable Mountain.
다음은 The Pilgrim's Progress 중 가승에 대한 단답형 영어 질문 5개, 5포함과 본문 요약 및 이해를 돕는 Chapter 1. Short answer questions. 1. Q. How many days were Christian and Hopeful imprisoned in Doubting Castle? About 4 days. 2. What day of the week did they escape from the castle? Sunday. So Q, who owned Doubting Castle? Giant Despair. 4. What was the name of the key that helped them escape? A. Promise. 5. Who encouraged Christian not to take his own life? Hopeful. Part 2. Comprehension questions based on summary understanding. 1. Why did Christian and Hopeful end up in Doubting Castle? They left the narrow path and entered By-Path Meadow, which led them to the castle. What did Giant Despair try to convince the pilgrims to do during their imprisonment? A. He tried to make them commit suicide out of hopelessness. 3. What spiritual lesson can we learn from the key called Promise? A. God's promises can set us free from despair and spiritual bondage. 4. How did Christian finally remember the key that would help them escape? After praying and struggling, he suddenly remembered that he had the key all along. What does Hopeful represent during this episode? A. He represents steadfast faith, encouragement and spiritual endurance in suffering. 이 에피소드는 신앙의 여정에서 겪는 깊은 절망과 회복, 그리고 하나님의 약속에 대한